Hello, all, and welcome to this episode of Finneran's Wake. I'm joined today by a very special guest, Ignacio Zuleta, a lawyer, yogi, writer, teacher, and dear friend of mine, with whom I've maintained, despite our distance, a most friendly and fruitful correspondence. Ignacio comes to us from Colombia, a beautiful nation about whose politics, history, and culture will soon be treated to a brief lesson. Ignacio, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you very much. I feel like I'm at home, even if we haven't seen our faces yet. For your public, I'm telling you that you helped me a lot in my project when I had to do editing in English because my English is very rusty. So I tried to do my best.
Yes, and I hope my suggestions were of some benefit, and I'm very much looking forward to,
Well,
to
the,
hearing of your future success in those endeavors.
the public
So,
for you. Yeah.
so I know our time is brief. I want you to tell us, if you would, a little bit about your history. You trained as a lawyer, but now, as I understand it, earn your bread as a teacher and a writer. How is it you came to slough off your litigious skin and put on the coat of a writer, of a literary enthusiast?
I think words are the bottom of all it because when I studied uh, when I did my law degree, I actually wanted to train my mind more than go on into the real profession of being a lawyer. I think a sense of justice was at the bottom of it also, but words and I needed a sort of career to organize my mind. It was at the time I was 18 when I began, or something like that, maybe earlier. And my family discouraged me to do literary studies at the beginning. They said you will starve and all the same old story. So I decided to actually finish, even if I was not fully convinced. But I knew that was not going to be my main job in life. And then life came and proved me right, late, but it proved me right. When I discovered that there was a lot of corruption also in that system, the system of judges and the secretaries of the judge and things like that, and then you had to what we call oil their hands for things to happen. That was the last thing. Before actually I graduated, but I managed to graduate out of discipline for one side, and the other one I liked the history of ideas and political ideas. I'm from a family of politicians, and politics for me are ingrained, even if I'm not a politician myself, and I wouldn't like to be one. My sense of the world as a political scenario is very strong. So I can't help it. So I actually enjoyed the theories and the ideas and the history of ideas and the training of the mind and the order that gave me that I didn't have before. So actually, that's mainly what happened. Then I decided to do other things, and I began freelancing very soon, writing little articles for the newspapers. They were kind enough to publish a couple of things, but that didn't give me a lot of money. So I have been always on the poor side of things, which doesn't mean I'm not don't have plenty. I do. I feel like I'm very rich with whatever I have. But that is a different story because it belongs to the second stage of my history, as you say. Because at a certain point, when I was maybe 30, I decided to go to India. I was in a turmoil inside, and there was a turmoil outside also. It was a very difficult um, period for the country, and I suffered with lots of violence and small, big wars, etc. So I decided to go for India, and I left. I left for India, and I lived there for 12 years. And
So I
then,
so
yeah,
I want to accompany you on that hemispheric shift from the west to the east. Tell me, and I find this fascinating that you decided to make this move. Um, why did you decide to do so? Why did you decide to leave behind, as you said, the law, your home, and really everything with which you'd grown to become familiar, and totally uproot yourself? What was the inspiration that led you so far afield?
you see, you can imagine I have thought about that a lot 30 years down the line, right now. And since I'm writing a sort of novel, autobiographical novel, I have seen that it is quite important for me, myself, to understand why did I do that. What I can remember, and I'm precisely last night, I thought there was there were three reasons. The first one, I came out of the closet since I remember. I'm gay, and I'm fine with that. Never had big troubles with that. But then I had a late um, adolescence, like to say. I, I was responsible for some things at home, so I could live my own life, and then it came a little bit late. And when I was in my early 20s, I began to live my life fully. I became independent. I looked for a place, etc. And then I saw that my how do you say that, my road was really conducing me to something that was not very nice, because I was at that time lots of alcohol and promiscuity, and it was the 80s, and the AIDS was also there. And then at a certain point, I thought I have to stop. This is not the way I want to live. I lost my light, my inner light, which I had very clear for most of the time in my life. Said, no, that I don't like. I have to do something about that. And then I had a few options, and then I met some shamans in the Amazon, and they began the process of giving me some clarity with ayahuasca. It was a medical approach to the thing, not at all entertainment or psychedelic trips. It was I was I was sick, actually. My soul was sick, and I didn't see it clearly, and my body was ailing also with the abuses of alcohol and a couple of drugs, not hard drugs, but marijuana. And my mind was very dispersed. Sorry about it. Um, so it was not a decision, it was an opening to something new that could lead me again to a more um, transparent path.
Tell me if you recall, um, what impact did the ayahuasca have on you that perhaps a different drug like marijuana did not?
You see, since I did it in the frame of a medicine and not as an entertainment or fun for fun or whatever, I did it for my health, integral health, wholesome health, my mind, my emotions, my body. And I was very well led by my own doctor, which helped me with that, my personal doctor, which helped me with that. The experience was as I supposed it should be always be, which is the medicine gives you a clarity, it gives you a purge at all levels, and then you begin to build on that, and then you begin to see that you made you had your shortcomings, you made mistakes, you want to mend them. There is way to mend them. There's ways to mend them. So I began a process of it's like a resetting actually, and you don't have to have strong psychedelic experiences to to be able to do that. The shaman plays a very important role on that, because even without the vine, the medicine, the ayahuasca itself, they are so wise. They are so wise, and they are so intuitive, and at the same time they know so many things, little plants here, little tricks there, that can lead you even without the vine. But with the vine, and combined with the wisdom of the shaman, and that's the parenthesis, I wouldn't advise anyone to do the experience without a really recognized traditional shaman uh, in their context, by the way. So what I saw is that I could change my approach to life and recover my soul, and that's what exactly what it happened. You see, the role from Siberia and Amazon and wherever you have shamans, the role is that they recover your soul, but for that you have to believe in the soul, of course.
Sure. Yeah, that would be a precondition of this whole
But
process.
that is the premise. That is something that you have to believe in. That you have different components in you, and the ayahuasca can show you clearly that you are not just your physical body and your surroundings and your even your time, but there is a different dimension in which you could expand eventually and
Do you
build.
do you think that traditional religious practices can also get you to that point of profundity, of otherworldliness, or do you think that it's necessary to have the assistance, so to speak, of
It
a
all depends.
herb
There,
or a certain drug by which you
yeah.
might be elevated to
I,
another
I,
level?
I can follow you. You see, our current religious practices are um, slightly out of touch of the full needs of the human being. The theory is fantastic. The possibility of having a mystic connection or an ecstasy during prayer or meditation is there, and it happens. And it happened to me also later on in a way, nothing great. I'm not a saint or not enlightened or whatever. But yes, they can. But they have lost a little bit of touch and a little bit of flesh. So, for example, in a Catholic environment like mine, in a Catholic sort of say education or training, yes, you eventually could. They, these things could lead you to understanding your connection with the whole, with a capital W. What drugs do, and especially I prefer to call them medicines, because usually I try not to go to synthetic things, but anyway, that's another business. Um, what I see is that medicine is like ayahuasca or psilocybin. They are able to open under guidance, preferably, and expand the things that have been shrinked by civilization.
Mm.
And they can. So they really, you can actually, that happened in the 60s. You saw that, and it's happening again. People is resorting to medicines, natural medicines like those, ayahuasca or mescaline or psilocybin, not because they are addicts to drugs and they want to, because they really open up certain things that are clogged by civilization. But it's not the only way to reach there. It's not the only way. Yoga is another one. And that's what I wanted. Because you see, once I saw that ayahuasca could lead me also in that path. First, ayahuasca is it needs, as I understand it, context and a shaman, etc. And yoga is something that you do for yourself. So at the same time with ayahuasca, the possibility of doing yoga appeared, and it was so helpful and so quick and so soothing that I decided to take that path instead of the other.
So the ayahuasca seems to me to have been a useful entree to a deeper
Absolutely opening.
spiritual experience.
That was the how do you call that, key to opening the possibility of the other possibilities. And then I was able to choose. I was able to choose. Um, Yoga, I felt, was less alien to me than ayahuasca itself. Even if I'm Colombian and I can reach the Amazon in 1 hour flight and things like that, and they are Colombians also, and it's my tropics, and it's slightly alien because it's not part of the civilization in which I live my daily life. Yoga was incorporated slowly. And once I tried yoga, very nice, simple, but efficient practices under the guidance of the teacher also, I saw that they were slower, but they were safer. Why? Because I was still afraid that I could end, as I ended up with alcohol, in a dead end. And I didn't want that path.
Yeah, I can imagine you being apprehensive and a bit fearful of the possibility of relapsing, for lack of a better word. I don't know in what state you found yourself in the
You
80s,
know,
but with the use of ayahuasca.
well, it's not that you have the possibility of relapsing because ayahuasca is not addictive. But I sort of fear in my own self that maybe let's put it in positive. I thought it was safer way for me to build a new approach to life through yoga. And actually, when I decided to go to India, my decision was only for 6 months.
Mm.
But I met a master, and when I met the master, the guru, I saw very clearly that it was going to take longer than 6 months to change myself.
Now,
And
if I may interrupt, in the modern
yeah,
day, we have, at least here in America, we have yoga studios on every single block. You know, it's a ubiquitous presence
yeah.
in daily life. At that time, was yoga, I don't know if it was popular in America, but was it popular in Colombia? Did you have access to yoga at that point, or did you just simply decide to immerse yourself in in the very country in which it was originated?
You
What was the
see,
yoga?
yeah, at the 90s, which is when this happened, the commercial yoga was not so available here.
Mm.
It was beginning to happen in California and things like that. And from the 60s, you had sort of spiritual things which were not the spirituality of the West, but the East, coming and going, and everyone that was slightly interested could find something. But the same that I say with ayahuasca, I say with yoga. For me, it was very important to have a real tradition, something deep with roots, not commercial ayahuasca or commercial yoga. I was not at all interested in that. I was lucky because nowadays it's not very easy. Neither to find a shaman, a real one, because they're disappearing as the forest is disappearing, and nor a real guru because it has become a sort of um, economic pursuit of many in India itself. So it's a tricky one, and I was very lucky. I was very lucky. I was really praying with all my heart that that happened and happened out of luck, and also maybe because I didn't want to experiment just touching here and touching there. I just wanted to reset myself fully and seriously and joyously at the same time. Not seriously doesn't mean solemnity or anything like that. So I was lucky with that one, that I can tell you.
So you wanted the full immersion in this
Yes,
experience.
of course.
Now, for how long did you ultimately remain in India?
Well, I was telling you that I was going to be there for 6, 7 months, and then when I met the master, I said, "This serious thing. This I cannot. This is an opportunity I cannot. And then I decided to stay, and I didn't know for how long. And I actually came here after the first year and sold my things and gave my books away and burned my bridges and everything, my ships and my bridges. And I decided that I would definitely leave, etc., etc. But there was a time for that also. It was interesting because I didn't want, I was not reacting against my old self. I just wanted to build a new self somehow. It's not possible, I can tell you, after so many years. But then you can really begin anew if you are allowed to, if you don't have children, if you don't have commitments, if you don't have special duties, your parents or whatever. And that was my case because my mother died. She was my closest attachment, and she died while I was there on the first year. So I was free to come and see what was going to happen and go back, and I didn't have any responsibilities to fulfill directly, so to say. So in that I was lucky also, and I stayed for 11 more years without coming out of the monastery, the
And
ashram,
what
except
and what compelled you to return? Why did you not persist there?
it's not a matter of persistence. You see, then later on, I discovered that there is a time for everything, and that the usual period that you spend with a guru without um, losing your possibility of come back to the world and be functional, is 12 years. And it was exactly 12 years, I can tell you, with almost with days that a couple of things happened. I broke a hand, my brother was dying, um, there was a change in the ashram, etc. And a constellation of things happened that compelled me to come back and see what happened in those 12 years of apparent seclusion, because I was not at all aloof. I worked very hard. I didn't meditate the whole day. I worked like a madman from morning to evening because we had to run a place, and then it was work, 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 work. And the world came into the ashram even if I didn't go out. So I came to know the MP3s and the first cell phones and internet, for example, was raw when I went in the 90s. Was beginning. So no, I didn't have an internet myself. I didn't have a Gmail or whatever. And when I came out, the world was completely upside down in that sense, because everyone was glued to their mobile phones, and everyone was having a Gmail or Hotmail or Yahoo thing. So you can imagine. But I didn't suffer the transition without knowing that it was happening. I suffered the transition in the sense that I was not able to use them, but I knew that they existed, and there was a very big cultural shock when I came out. I can.
So that fact is that's remarkable to me. The fact that you entered into this world untouched or uncorrupted by all of our devices and all of our electronic attachments, and emerged back into it, returned into it when all of these things had descended upon us and infiltrated our everyday life.
Yeah.
You think, given our attachment to these things today, like I'm 30 years of age, so about the age at which you went to India, and I'm just thinking, would I be able to leave behind all of these attachments, all of these material attachments, all of these electronic goods of which we avail ourselves every day, as we are right now with this conversation? Would I be able to leave those things behind, completely immerse myself in this sort of spiritual and in some ways abstruse experience, and be sound of mind at the end of it? What do you think about that? What if you were my age today, if you were 30, 3 decades younger, How would you detach yourself from these technological gadgets and adopt a spiritual practice? Maybe it doesn't mean you go to India, but how does one inhabit a more spiritual place in this
Yeah,
world of technology?
I think one of the worst things that has happened to us and to your generation is that we have lost touch with nature. You see, in nature we can find everything. Actually, when you're in love, you don't need the WhatsApp to communicate with it. There are subtle ways to communicate also when you are linked to someone. You can think at the same time sometimes. Surprisingly, you can feel that she or he is in distress, and you don't actually you haven't seen a help in the WhatsApp, but you feel when you sever that cord that with nature, then you're lost. And that's why even if it is not fully possible today, I can't myself imagine that I would detach myself from all these gadgets for a very, very long time. It's good to give yourself enough time to experience that you can actually live and live better sometimes without all these things around. The very basic. If you live in an apartment like I do and I open my Wi-Fi because I lost my connection, you will see maybe 20 possibilities, nets, and they are all radiation. They are all radiating. Otherwise, they wouldn't reach your phone when you're home. If you can give yourself the space of mm, go to places in which that kind of radiation or whatever you call it is not there, electrical impulses which affect our cells and affect our atoms because we're made of energy, you will see that the withdrawal can recede easily. But you have to connect with nature. That's the only way. That's the only way. There are two ways to connect with the cosmos. Love is one, and nature. There's no other way. You cannot connect through this. You can connect to NASA and to the artificial satellites. But you cannot connect to the cosmos, the real one, the whole, the mysterious. One of the beauties of spiritual life, if you can call it, is that you have to face there are things that are mysterious. And science will never be able to decipher them because it's not a matter of the brain, it's a matter of the being itself. So yes, I think it will be very difficult for you, but also I am sure that you can give yourself a couple of detox time and see what happens. The first days will be horrifying. If you lose your cell phone, then you're lost. But you're not, actually.
Yeah,
You're not.
I will confess that I'm somewhat peculiar in that way. I'm actually quite content dispossessing myself of my phone and going out into nature. And I think that's something that a lot more people are realizing, especially in the West. I think a lot
Great.
more people are recognizing the salutary, profoundly salutary and healthful impacts of regaining connection with nature, going
Yeah.
out, for instance. And this is something that I preach that is very simple, and it's something at which a lot of people laugh, but simply taking off one's shoes, going outside and
Yes.
standing on the earth, grounding and feeling the impulse that that communicates itself from the soles of your feet to your knees to your visceral organs all the way up to your heart. I mean, it's so simple, and it only requires of you bare feet and a few minutes time, and it's
Absolutely.
profoundly effective. You can do it in a city. You can find a little park. You just need a little square of space to be able to do this. And I think people are beginning increasingly to understand the importance of such small acts of of natural um, reacquaintance, let's say, because
Yeah.
this is the state into which we were
Yes.
born,
Yes.
to be
Yes.
in union with nature.
Couldn't agree more. I do that every single day. I have to. I have
So
to.
that's one thing that I do want to ask you, just because of your vast experience. What are some of your daily activities, be they yogic or just simply therapeutic, in regard to connecting with nature? What do you do?
Well, the first thing I try to do is not to live in a dense environment, arid. I have to have. Well, you see, I'm spoiled. I'm spoiled because I live in the middle of the tropics, which are so exuberant, so rich, so full of things. We have. This is the country of, after Brazil, the second country in the world with more biodiversity. So um, that's why I'm living here. I'm not in China or somewhere else. But what I do is I try to do exactly as you do. For example, yes, or today I didn't do that. But yesterday, first thing in the morning, even before doing my stretching and my little breathing, and which I do every day, but I'm a very disciplined by force because I decided to be disciplined, and now my discipline is part of me, so it's easy. I went for a walk in the park. I have a park nearby, which is very nice. And it has a river, and then I take my shoes. The beginning, I walk a little bit, and then I do a nice walk. I try to listen, try to breathe, and that's very simple thing, and that changes the whole day. Actually, changes the whole day. But if you cannot do that, then at least, as you say, go to the small piece of earth, actual earth. Try to reconnect. The other thing that is a very nice thing is water. If you don't have park nearby, but you have a river or a lake or the sea, that water is also a very powerful part of nature. But you cannot live without that. You cannot. We cannot. And you were probably the last child of the woods because I mean your parents they run shoeless. How do you say that? No, no,
Mhm,
you
mhm.
say shoeless, and they climb the trees, and they still have this idea that nature is closer than we feel it today. I think that's a must, and we have to return to that. Otherwise, we are in the hands of Elon Musk.
Yeah, yeah, for better or worse. Now, tell
Or
me, do you think that um, Colombians, maybe more generally, have a better appreciation of and attachment to nature than, say, your average American?
I think so, but it's getting lost because you see, usually no, the population in Colombia used to be less than 50 years ago. The proportion was 65 rural and the rest was urban. Now it's only 18 to 20% rural. So it means that the new generations are have grown in a tiny apartment with no trees, with no garden, with no connections to the sea, or with no connections to the plains or to the mountains because they can't afford it or they have to live there. So it's locked, and they, of course, they live inside their Facebooks. They don't have an outside life. So the same alienation is happening all around the world. But we we do tend to appreciate nature more than the average American because of that. Because you have been bombarded more by TV and ads and things like that we did a couple of years ago. Now it's all the same thing, more or less the same thing. I don't know. It's tricky to say, but the other thing that happened is that middle classes, and I can speak about only middle class, um, middle classes, they used to have a piece of earth somewhere. piece of land. They had a little farm which was just for that, for going on the weekends and not too far, and it belonged to the father or the mother or whatever. So they used to have two houses, not necessarily luxurious or whatever, but they used to have a root somewhere. That is getting lost. That is getting lost. The people is returning also.
I think that the pandemic and the government's, at least the United States government's response to the pandemic was something of a stimulus for a lot of people to encourage them to perhaps remove themselves from the more hyper urbanized environments in which they were living and seek nature, for lack of a better word, to seek that out a little bit more seriously and enthusiastically. So I sense among many younger Americans something of a determination to divest themselves of what they had previously known and to seek sort of the unknown. It's not, I wouldn't say it's the majority sentiment among those in my age group, but there certainly is a strong feeling that the way in which we were living isn't the right and natural way. So you do see a lot of people returning to like drinking raw milk, for instance. Some things can be a little bit perhaps unusual.
But there are nice symbols. You see, you have to begin somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's what's happening. People are, I think, rereading works of Stoicism, works by Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus. They're hopefully reading Henry David Thoreau, one of my literary heroes, to whom I often return, and perhaps into whom I am turning as as I walk around endlessly in this big, vast, beautiful world. But I'm hopeful because I do see signs of change in America's
Thanks for
younger
telling me
generation.
that. Yes, I can sense them also. And you see, for the first time in my whole life, and I'm 67, um, we have now a president, whether you accept his ideologies or not, a president that the first thing that is talking about is climate change and the need to preserve the environment. Clearly, honestly, not cheating, whether he can or he cannot. So things are changing. Things are changing. Things should change. Otherwise, we will disappear. That's it. It's simple. Simple as that. We can't continue the trend in which we are. And there is a lot of complications because it's a political system, it's an economic system, it's a cultural system, it's lots of things. But if you, as young people to which the worlds actually belong, don't change, then there is no hope. But if you do and you open your eyes and you see and you stop behaving like the zombies that the system need you to be, then there's hope. Fine.
Yeah, that's a great message that we should be shouting from the mountaintops that there is hope. You mentioned the recent election of your current president, Gustavo Petro, I believe
Yeah,
is his
that's
name.
right. Yeah.
I think even the most astute observers of international politics probably only faintly recall that name and the message on which he ran. And I hate to go from the transcendental to the political, but maybe just for an American audience, you can explain a little bit more the political situation as it stands in Colombia right now, maybe some of the other issues with which the government and the people are grappling. You mentioned climate change, but maybe you could speak to that a little bit for a few minutes.
I can make a little brief on that. The first thing is that the land here is so badly owned, so badly, no, how do you say that? Distributed so badly that actually it's the real 1%. And then the rest, eh, there has there we haven't had an agrarian reform, we haven't had a couple of things. So this is beginning to happen also, and it's a nice thing. The other thing that we have to deal with is narco traffic. Can you imagine? That's a huge problem, which is not only our, yours, it's everywhere. So tackling things from the point of view of changing at least the distribution of the wealth a little bit, that the riches are taxed and they pay more as progressively as possible. I mean, that's common sense, is common sense. And then the idea of putting the whole agenda of protecting the Amazon as much as you can, as far as you can, as the lung of the planet. I think that's interesting. So the situation is, it has not changed physically yet because the president has been in office for less than 3 months. It's nothing. But there is a cultural revolution happening. Cultural revolution. The cultural revolution that you don't have to kill your neighbor to be able to win whatever. No kill, no kidnap, no aggression are well seen now. They are not part of our needs at the moment, so forget about that one. And whoever doesn't behave properly in that sense feels like at odds. That has changed. The other thing that happens is that hope is recovered, and that is I mean, a very very big change. I don't want to. I wouldn't like to go into details of the politics happening, but when you are told by your president that neoliberalism is dead and the war on drugs has failed, then you have some hope because it's true. It's true. It was a silly war, the war on drugs. It only gave us dead people for the thousands. It doesn't work like that. So it may change things. And the other thing is that either you change your fossil fuel dependence or there's no planet to talk about. So I think in that sense, it's interesting, you see. Since for the first time, I can see that he's speaking the same things that I've been trying to understand for the last 40 years and worried about. So for me, it's fine. Maybe the right thinking persons, they are fine if they think like that. Fear that he's a communist and he will. I don't think so. I think he's just a sheer Democrat. That's all.
So you think in some ways he's been maybe misrepresented as being farther or further to the left than he actually is?
Of course. And it is the duty of the press to misrepresent it.
From
The press
either
is
side. Yeah, from either side.
yeah. So it is their duty to not to help him much. But anyway, that let's not deal with politics anymore because it's a topic that I can go forever, and um, it's a process also for me trying to understand what's best and what is not. And what I think is that everyone can actually think whatever it is, provided the planet is not at stake, human life is not at stake. Then if you have those two things, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I thank you for indulging the political conversation just for a few minutes, because I think that it's important for Americans especially to have some awareness of what's happening, not just across the world,
Yeah.
but even to our south, right? To amongst the South American nations with whom we've always had such a fruitful history. There is something about which I've been thinking for the for the past few days, and that is not something into which we need to delve too deeply, but it's the political trends of the Western Hemisphere and the Eastern Hemisphere, specifically Europe and the Americas. How there seems to be the ascendancy of more progressive ideas and leaders here in America. If you look at Canada with Justin Trudeau, you look at America, the United States of America with President Biden, and you look at, depending on how progressive and left-wing you're going, you have in Cuba, Canel, and in Venezuela, Maduro, you have Petro in Colombia. And then there's more of a conservative, I don't know, response in the European nations, with Liz Truss in England and Meloni in Italy just recently gaining ascendancy as the prime minister, and in Hungary and Poland and Sweden as well. So again, not something that we have to touch in this conversation because our time is running short, but I've been thinking about that lately, that shift, or maybe a chasm that's developing ideologically, I think, between the two sides. And of course, things are always fluid in politics, so things could always change. But do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, but today is not the time, because yes, I have, of course, but I won't touch that one, because it's first is it's a thing that you have to say carefully. It can create discomfort. And second, because things, as you say, are fluid and they're happening. So let's see what happens. Because the geopolitics is something that is very interesting to look at these days. And in that, I wouldn't like to go.
Fair enough. I just know that you are a keen political observer, so I wanted to put forth the idea, and again, not necessarily as a topic about which we talk at any great length, but just to bring you into my mind and let you know what I've been thinking for the past few days. Just a phenomenon that I'm beginning to detect, and I don't know if there's anything to it, but just a little idea that's flickering in my mind. If anything significant will come of it, I know not. So we're just about toward the end of our conversation. You've been very gracious with your time, and I know you need to return to your teaching duties this afternoon. So I think we'll finish with just a few rapid fire questions that I'm coming up with.
Go for it. I'll tell you exactly how much time do we have. We have 10 minutes.
10 minutes. Let's
do short. If you have them.
Let's finish in maybe 5 minutes. That way you have plenty of time to recoup.
Time with me, and there will be a second chance, I'm sure.
Oh, I hope so. I hope so. So your country, Colombia, has become synonymous with Gabriel Garcia Marquez, right? The author of whom even everyone in the Anglophone world is so in whom we reverence so much. So of course we're all familiar with his name. Could you perhaps provide us with a few Colombian authors with whom we should familiarize ourselves? Who are some of the other authors from your country, past or present, whom we should be reading?
It's a very subjective answer, but if I have to read to youngish and after Garcia Marquez people, I would read Tomás González. Most of his books are extraordinary. I love the way he writes. And Santiago Gamboa, he's an urban iconoclast. He's very intelligent. He's very clever, and he's a very good writer. And he's got a lot of sense of humor. He's a little bit sarcastic, and but he's, from the literary point of view, I think his literature is extraordinary, and you should. And it's he must be maybe 50 now, so he's not too old. He's not too young. He's lived the century, and he will probably bloom later on friend with Tomás González and Santiago Gamboa. There is one that is not my favorite writer, but I admire him very much, which is called Vasquez. Oh, his name escaped my mind, and I just read it. I'm getting old. Juan Gabriel Vasquez. Juan Gabriel is he's a very good narrator. He's a little bit dense for my taste. I prefer lighter but not less significant literature. He studies very well his topics. He writes very well. He's a good narrator, but his language is a little bit alien to me. Those three, I think, are a very good example of excellent writers anywhere in Spanish, especially in Colombian Spanish, if you want to say that. It doesn't exist, but it's very appealing to us. It's our own language, and at the same time, it's not um, clumsy, colloquial, which is literature. I mean, it has a craft, it has a thought behind, it has a culture, it has readings, and it has the craft.
Yeah, it certainly has. Just from my small experience with this, with Spanish speakers, and especially Colombian Spanish speakers, there is a certain elegance in that tongue that is somewhat lacking in in the other parts of the world. So that's excellent, and I'll certainly make reference to these authors' names in the show notes below. That will be posted.
Yeah, I'll give you a hand with that through the whatever.
Yes, of course. Thank you for that. And maybe we'll end with this question, because you're someone who has tried so many things, succeeded in many more, and experienced a vast array of things throughout his life. What advice would you give to someone who feels perhaps unsettled where he is and wants to change his life in a radical way? What advice would you give to such a person?
No, it's the same advice that the Greeks gave in the how do you say that in English? The Sibila. The God, it escaped. Know yourself. Have a look at who you are. That's the only way. That's the only way. Only to discover that you are not you. If you are you alone, you are with others. But then change radically is not always necessary also. You can change slowly and not too radically and still change. And it's nice. And with age, you got to understand that it's a very nice approach also. I think I'll go back again. Nature will teach you what your real needs are. Because if you want to change, it's because you are not content with what you have. Why are not you content? Maybe it's because of your liver. Maybe it's because you don't have enough fulfillment as a human being on the planet Earth. Reconnect with nature. Don't have lots of expectations about what life is, because every day has wonderful things, horrible things sometimes, but they are intense, that they make you live. And then there's some of these little experiences is life. Life is not the extreme last end frontier. I don't know, nature. I'll go back to nature as the clue to understand yourself. And love your neighbor. That's not mine. That's love your neighbor, and then you will understand yourself.
I love your syncretic involvement of Greek philosophy, of Christian morality, and of Eastern philosophy. I think that's very
made of that one. I can't help it.
Yeah, I think that's so beautifully stated, and that's a sentiment with which I agree completely. And yes, of course, I love the immortal phrase, "Know thyself," as it was inscribed on the archway leading to the entrance of the temple at Delphi or Delphi.
Exactly.
So I think that's a beautiful message with which to end. And again, Ignacio, I thank you so much for being generous with your time.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Shy
Thank
of
you.
an hour.
By the way, I'm not successful. I don't feel myself succeeding in anything. I'm striving. So
Yeah, as we all are, but
that's
we
why. That's what I'm
certainly,
telling you. As we all are.
yeah, and I'm sure that you are harshest critic. I can tell you that from having
Well, maybe,
corresponded with
but
you.
I
And
love myself also sometimes.
yeah,
Thanks
yeah.
very
But
much,
oh,
Daniel.
you're so welcome. And the wisdom
It's been
that
a
you
pleasure.
conveyed, of course, and the wisdom that you conveyed to us has been extraordinary. And I hope that people will implement it in their lives. So again, Ignacio, thank you so much.
All right.
And I hope to speak with you again soon.